We are now counting down the days to the most exciting week of the year, and that is the Cheltenham Festival, and our sponsors, Mansion Bet, have got a special Cheltenham offer. Now that is, if you have a bet in the first race of each day and your horse finishes second, you'll still get paid out in full, and that's for new and existing customers. Welcome to the Stewards Enquiry on the Winners' Enclosure, and I'm pleased to be joined by Martin Dixon, and it's not long now.
It's not, no. This time next week we'll all be getting very excited, won't we? And no doubt there'll be a bit more news to come to light over the course of the next 7 days. Hopefully it's not bad news. We rewind the clock to this time last year, and in the lead up to Cheltenham we lost some big names, didn't we? The likes of Altior and Shunter didn't end up making the festival last year when we expected them to. So hopefully we don't have any of that this year, Emma.
It's very much a case now of just keeping every horse, well, as many as possible for some of the big yards, intact, isn't it? And just hoping day by day that everything stays in one place. We'll touch on a couple of the leading players here. That's Nikki Henderson and Paul Nicholls, because their final preps happened at the weekend, and Paul took quite a string off to Wincanton.
He did, yeah. Late last week he went off and took probably 3 or 4 lorry loads of horses to Wincanton, and they all went onto the racecourse and just did their final pieces of strong work, really. And there were some videos doing the rounds on Twitter of those gallops at Wincanton racecourse, just really finalising their preparations, giving them their last spins, last serious pieces of work to get them at concert pitch for the festival. And as you say, it's very much going to be a case from this point onwards through the next 7 to 10 days of just keeping horses cantering, keeping them as fresh as possible, and going through the motions really with them. I think the hard work is done, and you just hope as a trainer and connections of any horses aiming for Cheltenham now that you just don't have any little hiccups in between.
Okay, well, let's touch on a couple of Paul Nicholls' big chances of the week, because Brave Man's Game is a horse that I know you're quite keen on.
Yeah, I really like this horse. He's obviously taking on a couple of the Irish challenges. We've got Bob Ollinger, who's now found his way to the ahead of the market for the Ballymore, which is the race that Brave Man's Game is going to run in. It's not always the case with these novice hurdlers and chasers that you know exactly where they're going to go, but we are in a fortunate position where Brave Man's Game has only got this one entry. It's very much been the target for him ever since he won the Challow Hurdle at Newbury late last year. And he's just been so progressive, hasn't he, Emma? He started off a little bit of a surprise when he won at Wincanton and landed his novice for the first time and got off the mark. But then he took a big jump forward next time, and again then went on to the Challow Hurdle at Newbury. And although you could say that maybe it wasn't the deepest race this year, he won it by 10 lengths, and he had it won at the second last, breezed clear of them. And with every single start, he's made huge progress, Brave Man's Game. So I'm expecting him to progress again, and I think he will be a big player in the Ballymore.
Yes, as you say, he can only beat what's put in front of him, and he's done it pretty convincingly in his last 3 starts. He's certainly a horse that I know that Paul's quite keen on. Another one you quite like is Hoogree.
Yeah, Hoogree's an interesting horse for Paul Nicholls. He had 1 run for the yard. He's a juvenile hurdler, had 1 run for the stable at Chepstow in the early part of this year. They just got him over from France and pushed him straight into a Grade 1, the finale juvenile hurdle at Chepstow. And he travelled really strongly through the race. He made a bad mistake at the second last and then he blew up. But Chepstow, really testing ground in the winter. It's hard work for horses up the hill as well. He hadn't long been with the stable because he'd only run in France in the middle of October, so they can't have had him for too long at that point in time when they ran him in the finale. And with just 1 run under his belt for the Nicholls stable, he's been sort of targeted at Cheltenham, targeted at the handicap. He's got a mark of 130 for the Boodles juvenile hurdle. I think that could prove to be very lenient indeed. There's just been a steady weight of support for him over the course of the last 4 or 5 weeks, really. And he's found his way towards the head of the market now for the Boodles. So he's another one that would have gone to Wincanton and had his final preparations there last week.
Well, Nikki Henderson will have a big team heading, of course, to Cheltenham. We'll start off with one of his key players, and that is, of course, Shishkin.
Yeah, I mean, we know that he's potentially the stable star. We've got Altior, you know, he might have one last say. We'll see. We talked about him the other week. I'm not so sure about his chance of beating Shunter, but Shishkin is the horse that's sort of almost there already, ready to take Altior's place at the top table in seasons to come. He's got an Ergamin to worry about. I think he's the right favourite for the Arkelema myself. I mean, his form, we touched on it last week, getting a boost with Tamarok de Matan winning at Kempton. And he's just been so impressive with everything he's done over fences all season. He's jumping from day one, from the first fence that he jumped in public, has been outstanding. And he does look as if he's going to make into an even better chaser than he was hurdler last season, when he still managed to win the Supreme Novice as a hurdler, despite, as I say, maybe being a better chaser.
It was certainly nice to see his form boosted, because some could say, well, what is he beating? But he's certainly beaten everything that's been put in front of him, and he's done it well. He looks very hard to find any faults. His jumping slick, everything.
Yeah, this is it with him. What holes can you pick in him, really? He's won at the track. He's won a Grade 1 at the track as a novice hurdler last season. His jumping has been outstanding. He has clocked really fast times. He's beaten horses that have franked the form. So on every level, when you analyse his form and you watch his videos and the way that he's gone about everything, he is an outstanding prospect, Shishkin. It's going to be some race if Energumin lines up and gives his running, because again, you can say similar comments about him, but my own preference is certainly for Shishkin at this moment in time. And probably in some ways that is related to the fact that he was such a good novice hurdler last season, and the fact that he's already done it at a festival. He's done it at the track over hurdles last year. And I think those things do just tip things in his favour.
Another one of Nicky's that I know you quite like is Shantry House, who was third in last year's Supreme and has looked quite good over fences.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the not outsiders, but slightly bigger priced horses for the Marsh Novices Chase. He's certainly been not one of the first 3 or 4 in the market. I think he's as big as around 10-1 in some places. Others are shorter slightly, but he, as you say, finished third in last year's Supreme Novices behind Shishkin. At that point in time, he looked like a horse that wanted to go up in trip. Now, they tried him over 2.5 at Cheltenham in December, and he was a bit disappointing. I'm not sure what the problem was that day, but he's bounced back from it, so I'm willing to forgive that run, really. He went to Wetherby last month. He put up a really good round of jumping. He won very easily indeed, admittedly in lesser company, but he's now won 2 of his 3 starts over fences. He's very lightly raced all told. There's only twice in his life when he's been beaten Chantry House, and one of those was last year's Supreme Novice. As I say, I'm willing to just put that run in December down to being a blip. And if you take everything else that he's done, he'll certainly be an each-way player in the Marsh Novices.
And I know the jury is slightly out when it comes to Altior with you. I'm pretty convinced you don't think he's as good as he was. The application of cheek pieces, do you think that'll help him concentrate?
Yeah, it's just been interesting, hasn't it, reading comments from Nikki Henderson. He was sort of edging that way towards, we might consider the cheek pieces. I think that's becoming likelier and likelier. Again, the final preparations would have been put in place with Altior last week. I'm sure they'll have worked him at home in the headgear just to see what sort of impact that will have had. And with the vibes being pretty positive in terms of how he's been working, if that indeed has come in the cheek pieces and they've given him a gallop in the headgear and they're sort of getting positive signs, then you would expect him to line up in the champion chase with the headgear on. It might increase his chance a little bit. As you say, I still feel that he's probably just a slightly waning force. And if Chacun Pour Soi was to turn up and produce the sort of performances he's been putting up in Ireland, he'd be tremendously hard to beat.
And looking back on the weekend, it's certainly worth talking about the Shunter, who is now eligible for a £100,000 bonus at the festival. I think he's in 5 different races. He keeps improving this horse, doesn't he?
He really does. I mean, he's had a fabulous season. He came over for the Greatwood Handicap Hurdle at Cheltenham earlier on in the year. He won that, and he won that quite easily. He went back over fences then, a little bit unconventional, but went back over fences in Ireland. He ran extremely well despite having a tack problem at one point in the race, and then rallying late on. And then up at Kelso at the weekend, they put up fantastic prize money. Fair play to Kelso for the Moor Battle Hurdle. It was a big pot, and then in addition to the big pot of prize money, they're putting on £100,000 bonus if the winner, i.e. the Shunter, manages to go to the Cheltenham Festival and win a race at the festival. He's got various options, the Shunter, and make no mistake, winning, for all that the Moor Battle was very competitive, winning any race at the Cheltenham Festival will be a hell of a lot more difficult than it was winning the Moor Battle on Saturday. But he is going the right way. I think I'm sort of the feeling like the Friday races that the Shunter's in will be more likely, just to give him an extra couple of days, because obviously it's a pretty quick turnaround having won on Saturday. So he's got the Martin Pipe Conditional Riders Handicap Hurdle and possibly the county hurdle as options, depending on whether they want to go 2 or 2.5 miles. But as I say, just an inkling of my own is that they'll just give him as much time as they can, and perhaps waiting for the Friday for one of those 2 races would be the best option.
Yeah, I agree with you there. He had quite a tough race, didn't he, at Kelso? He had to work quite hard.
He did. I mean, 2 miles, although he won the Greatwood earlier on in the season, 2 miles is, obviously, it's the shortest trip you can run over, but he's not just a 2-miler. He won over 2.5 earlier on in the year. The ground was very testing in the Greatwood. It was a strongly run race at Kelso on Saturday that he took a little bit of time to pick up in. And I feel like, particularly if the ground is sort of good to soft next week at Cheltenham, it might just be that they decide to go up in trip a little bit more and bring his speed into play over a longer distance rather than being caught out potentially by good ground over 2 miles.
You've touched on the fact that it was a really good card at Kelso on Saturday. It certainly was. We've now got a very clear favourite for the Grand National in the shape of Cloth Cap. He was impressive, wasn't he?
He was fantastic, wasn't he? I mean, he went up there rated 147, taking on, he was giving Asa, who was runner-up in the race, he was giving him weight, and Asa was rated 158 going into it. So you've got to look, and if you think, okay, Asa, I'm not saying for a minute he definitively ran right up to his rating of 158, but he wouldn't have been far off running to it. And Cloth Cap has given him weight and a beating. So essentially, we're looking at Cloth Cap having put up a 160 plus performance in that Premier Chase at Kelso on Saturday, and yet he's able to run in the Grand National because the weights are already out. He's able to run in the Grand National unpenalised off a mark of 147. So there will not be, on paper at least, a better handicapped horse that runs in this year's Grand National than Cloth Cap. He's going to have about a stone in hand of his official mark when he runs at Enquiry next month. He's there at the top of his game. He's put up 2 really, really good front-running performances, bold jumping performances in both the Ladbrokes Trophy and on Saturday in the Premier Chase. And he just looks tailor-made for Enquiry as well. I mean, he's not the biggest of horses, which might put some people off, but then neither is Tiger Roll. And he certainly jumps with real alacrity and enthusiasm. And, you know, the trip would be a minor little niggle that he's never been as far as that, but then not many horses have. And he does give the impression that he'll keep on galloping. He certainly gave that impression at Newbury back in the autumn.
Well, John Joe O'Neill knows how to train a Grand National winner. And of course, also Trevor Hemmings, he's got a fantastic record in the race. He's looking for a 4th win.
I mean, I think everything Trevor buys is essentially bought for the Grand National, isn't he? He seems to own hundreds of horses at any one time, and all of them, ultimately, the target would be, if you can be a Grand National horse, then please get me there. So I think that's the instruction to all of the trainers, you know, when they first get hold of horses. Cloth Cap's really developed, and I wouldn't have guessed it this time last year that he'd be a Grand National horse, but he certainly looks it now. And as I said, in weights and measures terms, he's a worthy favourite. I think he's around 6-1 in most places, a little bit shorter in some, but 6-1 looks the best price you can get for this year's National.
I tell you what's really hotting up is the Jump Jockeys Championship, because there's not that much between the top 3 now. This is going to be really interesting, and it should run right to the line. Brian Hughes 109, Harry Cobden 103, and Harry Skelton 101. How do you think this is going to pan out? Who's got the best ammunition, do you think?
This is going to be a developing story, isn't it? The next 6 weeks or so, it's going to really hot up. You see how tight they've got now. Brian's been at the top of the leaderboard for a good while now, but with Cobden and Skelton getting a bit of a sniff, you know, within touching distance of him and not too long until the end of the season, they find themselves in a position where they kind of have to really give it a big shove and a push. Where do I see it going? My hunch is, I do think it'll go right down to the wire. My hunch is that Harry Skelton's going to have so much ammunition with Dan Skelton's horses through every week, every day of the week. You look at them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right through to the weekend. They've got quality, but they've also got a huge amount of quantity at all levels. They seem to have runners in the 0 to 100 handicap hurdles and chases, as well as good novices, and obviously some top class horses as well. So there's so much ammunition these days within that Skelton yard. Plenty of horses have been held back and saved for better ground in the spring as well. I'd probably just favour Harry Skelton for all that he is at the moment. He's third of those 3.
Before we discuss this week's race in focus, just a reminder of Mansion Bet's best offer, and that is if you have a bet in the first race each day during the Cheltenham Festival and your horse finishes second, you will still get paid out as a winner, and that is to new and existing customers. This week's race in focus is the Stayers Hurdle, and before you get Martin and I's views on the race, we're going to hear from Mansion Bet's ambassador, and that is the leading jockey in the championship, and that is, of course, Brian Hughes.
My tip for the Stayers Hurdle is Paisley Park. He's a previous winner of the race, although he got beaten in this race last year. It's come out that he had a problem after the race, so we can excuse him that run. And I mean, he's form around Cheltenham. Obviously, the horse he beat the last day in Time Hill will give him plenty to think about. But I'd be still sticking with Paisley Park. I just like everything about him.
Good to hear from Brian there. And Martin, this is an open race, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, there's no doubt the right two horses are at the head of the market, Paisley Park and Time Hill. And in truth, it's not really surprising that there's very little between them in the market, and they will divide opinion a little bit. Paisley Park, winner of the race 2 years ago, he put up a fantastic performance that day. We all remember that last year he was disappointing, but in truth, that is his only really disappointing run through the last 3 seasons, pretty much, Paisley Park, when he bombed out in this race 12 months ago. It's been good to see him back performing right up to his standards of a couple of years ago this season. He couldn't quite beat Time Hill at Newbury earlier on in the year, but then back on a stiffer track at Ascot, he did so, and he did so despite quite a steady pace through that race. They didn't go that hard at Ascot the last time that we saw both Time Hill and Paisley Park, and probably it suited Paisley Park the least. He didn't look likely to win for a long way, but he came with his typical strong finish and just got up in the shadows of the post. I think much really will depend on the tempo of the race. The stronger the gallop, the more it will suit Paisley Park. The more emphasis there is on stamina, whether that's ground related or pace related, the better it will suit Paisley Park. So connections of Paisley will certainly be hoping that there's a good bit of pace on, and maybe that the ground is on the soft side as well on the Thursday.
It is extremely difficult to split the two, isn't it, Time Hill and Paisley Park? They're 1-1 on their last 2 encounters. Time Hill beat Paisley by a length and a half. That was in the long distance. And then I think there was just a neck between them last time. So I know when you were looking at it, you were sort of saying to me, I'm a bit split. It's a difficult race.
I think ultimately, I'm going to go Paisley Park at this stage, because I feel like Cheltenham, he's done it at Cheltenham before. The stiff finish will suit him. I know Time Hill has run extremely good races at Cheltenham himself in the past, but I think the stiff climb to the line, Newbury really suited Time Hill. It's a flat track, level track, and Paisley Park, it was first time out in his season as a 9-year-old. He possibly needed the run a little bit, and I'm not sure that flat track suited him in quite the same way that a stiff finish does at both Ascot and even more so at Cheltenham, just simply because the end of his race is his best part. It's when he's at his strongest, and when you've got a stiff climb to the line, it really helps a horse like Paisley Park. So I'm going to go with him at this stage, but I do feel that a lot will depend on the final makeup of the race and how much pace there is. Like I say, how many runners are there? Is there enough pace on? And the more pace there is and the softer the ground is, the more I'd be in the camp of Paisley Park. Whereas if it was to tip the other way, maybe come declaration time, I might have a slightly different view on it. But Paisley Park, I mean, you can't really knock his profile, aside from that disappointing run in last year's Stayers Hurdle, which, as I say, is very much a one-off in his profile over the last 3 seasons. Aside from that, it's very hard to pick any holes in him.
Which of the opposition do you feel poses the main threats to the big two?
I'd say Sire de Burley is a horse that would come right into the mix. If you look at his Cheltenham Festival record, he's won handicaps at the meet in the last 2 years, so he's got a fantastic record at the track. And this year, obviously, they're aiming a little bit higher with him and going down the Stayers Hurdle route. So I'd say that Sire de Burley, given his course form, would be a player, certainly from an each way perspective.
Okay, brilliant. Martin, thank you very much indeed. As always, we'll be back in the week, and enjoy the week until then.